Our next speaker is, has two atypical passions. They are classical singing and kite surfing. Everyone, please welcome Coline.
So my name is Coline Zeballos. I am our strategy lead in Roche Pharmaceutical since 2 years, and we'll be talking about ensuring the quality of your R packages for regulatory submissions, a view on how Roche enables submissions in R. This title is a bit ambitious, I have to say, before we start, as we don't fully know yet how to do clinical submissions to health authorities in R. But I'll share where we are in the industry, in the pharma industry, and specifically at Roche. A couple of words before I start, because it's probably the first time you meet me. So my name is Coline. I'm Swiss and French. I'm based in Switzerland. And I think I have a pretty international background. I've lived in several countries, as you can see here. And I'm also married to a Bolivian and US citizen, man. So for all of the reasons, you can either speak to me in French, English, or Spanish, but don't try anything else. My educational background is in business, and I went into the world of data science and Python a bit later after I started my career. And I like to say that I use my business and data science and technical experience to lead experts in delivering value, business value. So I'm really in between the technical world and the business world. I think it goes without saying that the technical experts are needed in our industry, but we also need people who can translate our experts' work, for non-technical people and stakeholders, who usually are also the decision makers. So that's what I do in my current position, actually right now at R, as R strategy lead in the pharmaceutical division of Roche. I drive the IT strategy to support the use of open source programming languages like R and Python. And one of my major contributions recently is around enabling R package validation in our company. Outside of work, as Jared said, I'm into a extreme sport, it's considered extreme sport, called kitesurfing. So it's a really cool sport that makes you travel around the world to find the perfect wind and wave conditions. I highly recommend it. So that's it about myself. So don't hesitate to connect with me. I'll have my LinkedIn and Roche email at the end of the presentation. So we'll be covering today the following topics. I'll give a little pharmaceutical context of because we are going to talk about building our packages of quality, but I come from the pharma context, so keep in mind that this is coming from one lens. We're looking at this from one lens. We'll talk about the transition from SAS to R and what health authorities expect. Then I'll give you some tips about how to ensure that you build good quality packages. And finally, I'll share most of the initiatives actually that Roche is a part of, and also not just Roche, but the pharma industry, what we do basically to enable submissions in R, which is what we are all interested in today. So the pharma context. As I said, I work at Roche Pharmaceutical, but within pharma, I work in IT to support the clinical product development. So we see here the typical, let's say, drug development process that a pharma company needs to follow to put its drug on the market. At Roche Pharma, we are really convinced that collaboration and open sourcing of analytical tools is the right way forward. And there's a trend right now to use more R in all the big pharma companies. This is really a unique opportunity to change the way we work together and the way also we bring new drugs to the market. I will share later with you the different initiatives, as I said before, that are ongoing to enable submissions in R. But we are really at the beginning of the journey, and that's what I was mentioning to you at the beginning in my first slide. It's that we just started this journey. And actually in 2019, so 2 years ago, Roche T-Centrix, one of our drugs, one of the working groups of a drug, they completed their first R-based FDA submissions. And to our knowledge at the time, it was the first submission within Roche, for which the majority of the analyses were done in R. Also, it was the first time an R package was submitted to the FDA. So you see, we come a long way. And a couple of weeks ago, actually, the news just went out yesterday, the R Consortium, which I will talk about later, and Roche is an active member of the R Consortium, they successfully submitted an R-based test submission package through the FDA submission portal. And the package was well received by the staff, the reviewers, and they were able to reproduce the numerical results that we obtained. So it's really a great step forward, but just wanted to remind ourselves that we are moving, we are at the beginning of our journey, basically. I wanted to say we're moving slowly, but we are moving at the pace we are moving at, which is already really good. If we take a bit of distance from what we're trying to do in this industry, the general public and pharmaceutical regulatory agencies expect medications and medical services to be the result of a good and sound science and accurate analyses, right? So bugs and defects in the program used to analyze this clinical data can result in incorrect analyses and therefore can have a damaging consequence to public health and trust also. Right? So it's important for us to follow quality control processes to identify errors in our analysis programs. Because we need to remember that everything we do is for the patient at the end, right? So there would be no concept of validation if we didn't have to deliver drugs to patients. So we have a responsibility, and that's for this. Then from SAS to R. So we come really from a SAS world. As I said, we were just starting to submit work with R, but we come from everybody using SAS to now at Roche, as you can see here, we have 45% of the current R users who use R for more than half of their programming work. So there is, and this was really lower, of course, a year or two ago. So we really see in our company and in the industry a move from SAS to R. And I want to remind ourselves that the use of SAS is really not mandatory. So when people ask me, can I submit software programs other than SAS? Yes. So actually the use of SAS is not mandatory in the analysis of clinical study data. So instead, other softwares like R could be used. The thing with SAS is that we do not need to validate the software. We only need to validate the outputs, and then we archive the programs for future reference. For R and Python, we need to also validate the program functionality and the package system. And then we archive the programs, and we need to keep the package snapshots so that in the future, if the program is run on the same data sets, health authorities and reviewers can obtain the same results. So we have a new, let's say, set of complexity with open source programming languages like R compared to SAS, which was a licensed and not open source programming language. Reviewers normally in health authorities, they can generally use the software that suits their needs of their choice. So we really need to give an understanding and give them an understanding of how our methods work in our analysis so that they can reproduce our work. But this also means that the health authorities need to train themselves to gain the capabilities for receiving, running the programs and the software that we provide to them. So it's not just us in the industry who need to adapt, it's also the health authorities who need to adapt their internal capabilities and knowledge. And also another question I receive is, do I need to follow a particular style or a convention when I write software programs? Basically, a general rule is that your software program needs to be, let's say, clear and of good quality, regardless of whether you're going to submit it to health authorities. This is something that we see as big value, that we develop as our developers, that we develop code of good quality. And there are a lot of best practice guidelines and guides available on the internet and in several, let's say, groups who provide their guidance. Yeah, that's really where we come from, right, with SAS. But I just wanted to break down a myth that SAS is the only programming language that the FDA allows. This is not true. So how do we ensure quality of our packages? So I'm going to give you a couple of tips. In general, so these are tips to ensure the reliability and the quality of our packages used in regulatory interactions. Not just for drug approval, not just for the pharma industry, but this is general good practice. So obviously, and some of these might seem obvious for you, but they're not really, I think. So unit tests. So this is a primary concern for the reliability of the package. It's really that the accuracy of the code it needs to be let's say covered. So unit tests are basically granular pieces of logic present in the package that is tested to ensure that the outputs match reference values. So it's really important to specify the unit test, to document, to also document statistical methods implemented, and so on. Consider assessing also inputs as part of a function. This means to consider checks that can be, for example, performed on inputs and where logical outputs and intermediate values to minimize the risk of the package function being used with inputs that were unexpected by the developers. Peer review seems like a very basic one, but this is really, I advise you to look out for people who can extend and build on your code. Because when a package has significant use by other people and other also packages in a company's workflow, CI/CD testing, so continuous integration, continuous deployment testing, should be extended to also rerun the unit tests against packages that depend on the developer's package. So really use your network to build your package of good quality. Automation also is obviously a very key point. I just mentioned it with the CI/CD. Code maturity as well. It's very useful to clearly state the current maturity of the code, particularly to let people know if the code is still in the pre-release stage, for example. And there's one method that you can use called the lifecycle. You can use lifecycle badges. So, to use this function lifecycle badge, and you write in parentheses stage in which you're at. That's a small tip. Also, refer to the intended use of the package. This is very important. It's really a best practice to ensure users are aware of the context the code was written to be used in. Right. So you can use vignettes, for example. That's a method to explain the intended use of the package. And when appropriate, the vignettes can be annotated with notes on the use and the reference to any relevant literature that you leverage in the design of your package. Another one is so in the R language, what is, as you may know, I'm sure we have a lot of good programmers here on the call. What is called R core is composed of base R and recommended packages. And the base R packages are developed and maintained by the R development core team. And within the R core team development, related documents, guidelines are provided, basically. And these guidelines are in place to maximize code quality and to facilitate ongoing code validation during the development of your package and in between each version release. So a set of validation tests are maintained by the R core team to enable the testing of source code against known data and known results. So any error noted during the test, they are resolved prior to the release. So this is really handled by the R core team for R base package, but more work is expected on your side when you're using, between quotes, maybe riskier packages and less widely used package. Right. So this is to keep in mind. Double programming as well is one. I don't know if you've heard. We use this term a lot in the pharma industry. Basically, this is the idea that we do a double program analysis when we're planning a regulatory submission in multiple languages. So the quality control step of analysis programming is a good first use of open source technologies. And by using multiple languages, basically any errors or difference in the default option setting or algorithm that you use in one programming language can be caught, and can be identified by double programming, by doing it by the other language, basically. So you compare the same code, but into the same, the same code, intended code in two different programming languages. So what we're doing in this space, this is important to say, that to influence health authorities and for them to accept, to change, or to receive something new, or if we have if for example Roche comes to the FDA and says we would like to submit our outputs in this format, it's very unlikely that if Roche comes alone to the FDA, that the FDA will say, okay, fine, we will adapt all our processes and meet your need. No, usually it works more at a sponsor level, at an industry level. And the next 3 slides will be about those initiatives at a sponsor level, and also that Roche is a part of, obviously. So the R Consortium, I imagine most of you have heard about it. The R Consortium members are probably most of the big pharmaceutical companies and biopharma companies. The idea is really to provide, let's say, support in developing, maintaining, distributing, and using our software. And they are organized in working groups. I listed here a couple of working groups that are of interest in our topic. Especially the first one, which is the our submission working group. They focus on IT and platform challenges that must be addressed in order to make an all-R regulatory submission. They provide examples of submission material. They make it available to the public to identify potential gaps in R-based submissions. So they really work hand in hand with the FDA. That's really important to say, because that's the only way we will move forward. It's really to work with the FDA. And recently, this is a key milestone. So actually, I already mentioned it before, but this is really, their goal is to allow easier R-based clinical trial regulatory submissions. And I already mentioned the key milestone, but I'm so excited about it that I wanted to repeat it. Then we have another working group, which is the regulatory reporting table. Here they create standards to guide the development of R tools for creating tables that meet requirements of the FDA. So that's also a really important one. Then we have R certification, who more works on making sure we have material and curriculum for statistical programmers who have skills both in SAS and in R. So that's important. Then I'll go to the Pharmaverse, because time is quickly. This is in progress, but it's very promising, so I think it's worth mentioning. I cannot share yet a link, but the idea is to provide open source R packages from like the whole end-to-end clinical reporting packages needed in the end-to-end workflow that we saw before. So really from the creation of SDTM, which is a format we need to create, then from SDTM to ADAM, which is another format, from then the creation of TLGs, the table, listings, and graph, and then to submit, and this is for the e-submission process. So here we have, this is really a cross-pharma collaboration. We have Roche, Merck, at least, and the other ones I cannot divulge, but this is really, really promising, because we will have really a set of packages that we can use for your end-to-end analysis. Fuse also, Accumulus, I don't have time, but these are like key initiatives happening cross-pharma. And here at Roche, we have 2 pieces that you can use and reuse for your validation work that I shared here. Yeah, time is passing by. I have much more to say, but thank you very much to the RGov organizing committee, and of course to all the industry collaborators. Thank you very much.